Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, Alaska's pipeline to the future, delivering oil today, sustaining operations for tomorrow, committed to safety, operating the 800-mile Trans-Alaska Pipeline since 1977.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website, arh.noaa.gov, getting updates to the forecast there. You can call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. And I'd also like to take this time to talk about the Great Alaska Shakeout that is happening this Thursday, 1:36 p.m. And if you want more information on that, you can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. A lot of information is being posted by both of those sources. And just a quick heads up, it is about earthquake safety and awareness, how to properly plan an emergency plan and how to stock up and be safe. And the stop, drop, and hold, where you can get safe during any earthquake at any time. And hold on under a table or any other sturdy object in case anything is falling from the ceiling until that earthquake stops shaking. Starting us off for the main part of our forecast, we're going to take a look at our warnings. We only have one out at this time, and that is in the Juneau area. That is a high wind warning that is in effect until 4 p.m. tomorrow. The main areas that impacts is downtown Juneau, Douglas, and interior passes such as Taku Inlet. The reason for this is there is high pressure that is out to the north and east with lower pressure in the eastern Gulf of Alaska, creating a very tight pressure gradient there with some gusty winds through a lot of those passes with max gusts about 80 miles per hour. That can happen early tomorrow morning. Again, those areas are downtown Juneau, Douglas, and any of the interior passes such as Taku Inlet. That will be in effect until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, and that is a high wind warning. If you were here in Anchorage for this morning, you would have noticed a brown haze kind of over the eastern part of the city, and what that was some smoke, some dust, and some engine exhaust that got caught up under an inversion that was happening out over the eastern part. That's due in part to the high pressure that was sitting overhead with a lot of colder air down at the surface, and as we know, warm air is what rises, so when there's a lot of dense cold air down low, it gets trapped under some warmer air above. That's an inversion, and that top of that was near about 1,300 feet, and that's keeping a lot of that dust and haze down underneath. And until we either get some warmer air coming in, we get some winds moving that out, or we kick off that high pressure in the upper and mid latitude air, we can start to mix in that inversion with the warmer air above and start to see some of that clear up over to the city. But as we have the high pressure for the next couple of days, look to see this over eastern parts of Anchorage. And if you see up here in the upper right, Anchorage Air Quality Report had places in the eastern part of town with an unhealthy for sensitive persons for this morning. So keep track of that as well as we move out through the next couple of days with that high pressure hanging out overhead, creating those inversions in town until we get some stronger winds to mix that out. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, as we watch this one, we can see this band of clouds, and a low is starting to form there as it gets closer to the eastern Aleutian Islands, and we can see a lot of moisture coming up with that as well, with that southern storm track bringing in some rain closer to the central Aleutian Islands now. Watching this one more time, if we look way out to the east, we can see a deformation zone happening just off the western coast of the state out over the eastern Bering Sea. And that's just stretching there along that axis, bringing in some moisture to places stretching from the Alaska Peninsula all the way up that eastern Bering to around the Gamble area there. Now we'll take a look out over mainland Alaska, and as we start off in the southeast, we have our main low pressure system here really starting to stall out now, but still bringing in some moisture to places in the south of the southeast part of the state. And as we look once again, you can start to see over mainland Alaska a lot of the darker colored clouds, meaning that they're lower clouds. And we're going to watch as we step through time here. As the daylight comes up, we're going to start to see a lot of that cloud cover get burned off and start to clear out the skies all throughout mainland Alaska, leaving a lot of areas pretty clear and dry. As we look out over the forecast for the remainder of today, you can see the high pressure out over to the north and east of the state, extending in over mainland Alaska, having a lot of those clear skies and nice conditions. And then as we move further to the southeast, you can start to see a lot of the moisture moving into the southeast, and that's starting to switch and mix with rain and snow as we get into areas as far north as Sitka and then all the way to the south, becoming a little bit more rain further to the south. And you can see that tighter pressure gradient field right there with the higher pressure to the north, low to the south. And as we look into the tonight period a little bit later, you'll be able to see that continuing in and getting a little bit stronger overnight. Then right off the western coast of the state, we have that band stretching down from the St. Lawrence Island area where we're seeing a lot more snow down through Nunavik Island, becoming more mixed with rain as we get closer to the peninsula, with primarily rain on the southern portions of the Alaska Peninsula. Then out over the Bering Sea, some patchy areas of fog extending out into the western Bering, and then our other low coming up from the south, pretty weak, but bringing in some rain towards the central Aleutian Islands. As we move into the tonight period, that rain will make it there, some rain showers throughout the central Aleutian Islands. Further to the west, southerly flow bringing in some isolated areas of snow showers out to the western Aleutians and a western Bering Sea. As we move out to the eastern Bering, our band is still going to remain off the west coast of the state, bringing in a rain and snow mix to the peninsula, spreading up and starting to mix more with snow as we get closer to Nunavik Island, and then completely snow by the time we get up towards Gamble. But through the overnight hours, seeing high pressure dominate mainland Alaska, extending down into the southwest, keeping the skies pretty clear in terms of moisture, cloud cover for the most part as well, with maybe some lower clouds developing underneath that higher pressure. Then as we move out to the southeast part of the state, going to see the rain continuing for the southern areas of the Panhandle and then mixing with snow as we get closer towards Sitka. But you can see again the tighter pressure gradient, which is causing that high wind warning for places around the Juneau area. As we move into the Tuesday time, that's going to start to diminish a little, especially as we get into the afternoon hours, again dropping off at 4 p.m. there. But we are going to still see some areas of rain extending into from the Ketchikan area up towards about Sitka still. But as we get over mainland Alaska, high pressure continuing in the northeast, extending down over much of the state, clearing out the skies throughout Tuesday. Should be nice weather for mainland Alaska. Then just off the west coast, some remnants of the boundary there, bringing in some snow to the St. Lawrence Island area. Pretty diminished though as we get closer towards the Alaska Peninsula. And now high pressure building in from the south, starting to clear out the eastern Aleutian Islands. To the west, we are still going to see some rain mixing with snow closer to the Shimya area and some isolated areas of rain and snow showers for the Pribilofs as well on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, our former lows starting to really break apart now, but enough there to bring some rain and snow to the Pribilofs. But we do have another system coming up from the south that's bringing some rain to the western Aleutian Islands, starting to get a little bit colder as we get to the central Aleutian Islands, mixed with snow there. That's going to push off into the western Bering Sea with some areas of patchy fog mixed in. But we are having more high pressure move in from the south, extending now into the Alaska Peninsula, clearing out areas there, and still having the high pressure over the northeast, which is going to continue to bring clear skies throughout much of the day on Wednesday to mainland Alaska. And then down in the Panhandle, pretty clear now, except for right off the southern parts, a chance of rain there with a weakening low to the south. As we look now at our temperatures as of this afternoon, in the mid to upper 30s for most locations in the southeast, with Haines seeing 35 degrees. As we move to the south central area, pretty similar in the mid 30s there, a little bit warmer as we get closer to Kodiak Island. Kodiak City seeing 42 degrees, colder at Glen Allen, 24 degrees there. Taking us into the interior part of the state, majority of temperatures in the interior right around 30 degrees. Fairbanks a little bit warmer, 34 degrees there, and then colder as we get further to the north with the Pass and Arctic Village both seeing 12 degrees this afternoon. Along the Arctic coast right around 0 degrees, with Dead Horse being the coldest, -4 degrees up there. Down along the west coast of the state, Kotzebue Sound area in the lower to mid 20s there, a little bit warmer, getting closer to 30 as we get into the Northern Sound area, with Nome and Ammonich both at 28 degrees. That takes us into the southwest part of the state, where we're seeing temperatures in the more interior locations a little bit colder, lower 20s there, 22 degrees at Bethel this afternoon, right around 30 along the coast, McCormick at 30 degrees, Cape Newingham 32 degrees there, Dillingham 30 degrees, warmer as we get further to the south along the Aleutian Range, 40 degrees for King Salmon, and pretty similar along the Alaska Peninsula out into the Aleutian Islands, around 40 degrees there. Colder at Shemya, only 35 degrees, with St. Paul and St. George both seeing 37 degrees this afternoon. Taking a look at our lows for tonight, in the mid-30s for much of the Aleutian Islands, extending out into the Bristol Bay area. Going to drop down a little bit lower there, down into the mid to upper teens. Dillingham down to 16 degrees. YK Delta area, warmer along the coastline in the mid-teens there, but as we get closer to Bethel and Antioch, we are going to see temperatures of 8 and 9 respectively for lows tonight. Nome going to drop down to 12 degrees, down into the single digits for the Kotzebue Sound area, with Kotzebue getting to 6 degrees tonight. Then up along the Arctic coast, below zero there. Barrow expected to go down to -9 or -10 degrees. That's for tonight. And then down in the interior, single digits for most locations, colder as we get further to the east, dropping down to around -11 for Arctic Village, Fort Yukon, and Eagle. And then as we move into the south central, things warming up a little bit there. So sporadic temperatures there, 26 degrees for Talkeetna, but then colder as we get closer to the western Kenai Peninsula, with Kenai down to 14 degrees. But as we get back to Kodiak Island, mid to lower 30s there. Then as we get closer to Glen Allen, -1 there. Kodiak down to, or Cordova down to 25 degrees. Then down in the southeast part of the state, dropping down into the mid to lower 20s there. Warmer as we get further to the south, only the mid-30s for lows tonight. As we move into the highs for tomorrow, getting up into the mid-40s in the southern places of the Panhandle, only getting up to around 40 as we get further to the north, with Juneau getting up to 38 degrees tomorrow. And as we move into the south central part of the state, getting up to around 40 degrees there, a little bit colder for Homer, 36 degrees. And then as we get into the Glen Allen area, 21 degree high tomorrow. In the interior, going to stay in the mid to upper 30s for most locations. Still colder off to the east, 27 degrees for Fort Yukon. Then along the Arctic coast, going to see temperatures getting into the single digits, up to as high as 9 for Barrow. Dead Horse only getting up to 5 degrees. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, getting to the mid-20s there. In the Norton Sound area, up to around 30 degrees. Nome for 31 degrees. Then in the southwest part of the state, going to see temperatures in the mid-30s there, with Bethel getting up to 33 degrees. And then up as high as the upper 30s as we get into places in the Bristol Bay area, with King Salmon 38 degrees there, and then up around 40 degrees all along the Aleutian Islands. 37 degrees expected high for St. Paul tomorrow. Changing up a little bit, start to look at some aviation weather. Widespread MVFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, with some IFR conditions underneath our rain and snow as we get further up along the coastline up towards St. Lawrence Island area. Out over the state, VFR conditions expected, and then down in the southeast, going to see some MVFR with occasional IFR conditions. So look at our passes, going to notice a trend. All of the passes are going to be VFR with that high pressure sitting over us. Haddigan Pass, Lake Clark and Merrill, Rainy Pass, Windy Pass should all be VFR. High pressure dominating, clearing out the skies. Isabel Pass is going to be VFR as well. Tanita Pass should also be VFR. Portage expected to be VFR. Chilkoot and White should both be VFR throughout the day tomorrow. Looking at our freezing level, we can see it kind of hugging around the southeast part of the state, hugging along the Gulf Coast, down through the Alaska Peninsula, then out kind of along the ice edge as we move out into the Bering Sea and off to the west. We do have some pockets of warmer air up along the northwest part of the state, and another one down by the southeast in the Panhandle, extending in some warm air from the south. Let's look at our icing for tomorrow, between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, extending out over much of the Panhandle. Mainland Alaska should be pretty dry, as we're not expecting a lot of cloud cover. Then along the west coast of the state, between 5,000 and 12,000 feet there. Then way off to the west, between 5,000 and 10,000 feet, expecting some icing. Taking a look at our jet stream, the main part of the jet staying just to the south of the Central Aleutian Islands, up to 105 knots there, and then getting up to as high as 140 knots as it dips to the south. Out over the state, southwesterly component of the jet extending out over the Seward Peninsula area at 80 knots, going out into the Arctic, then back down into Canada about 110 knots, circulating around our main high pressure that's sitting out over the state. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, we have northerly flow about 40 knots coming in over the state with the strongest core of the winds moving just into the Kotzebue Sound area up to as high as 40 knots there out of an easterly direction, down to 35 knots as we get down over the south central, and southeasterly flow over the Panhandle around 25 knots there. So look out over the Bering Sea, circulation around our high coming out of the south, 25 to 35 knots, strongest closest to the high, a little bit weaker out over the Bering Sea, and then some southwesterly flow up to as high as 25 knots out over the western Bering. Down to 3,000 feet, southwesterly flow continues, 20 to 30 knots there. Flow around our high pressure, only getting up to around 25 knots. That's the strongest, right around the high again. And then out over the main part of the state, we are going to see some winds getting as high as 45 knots, with the core part of the winds going right into the Kotzebue Sound area. That's going to be out of an easterly direction, dropping down to around 15 knots out of the east for the south central, and then around 20 knots as we get over the southeast part of the state. Taking a look at our turbulence out over the southeast with some of those stronger winds there, and especially that gap flow that's going to be coming through. We are going to see some turbulence below 6,000 feet there, with those stronger winds moving through the central part of the state, extending out into Kotzebue Sound area below 6,000 feet there, and then a small area below 4,000 feet closer to the Adak area in the central Aleutian Islands. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest is Chief Warrant Officer Jimmy Keys. Jimmy was on our program last week. He has a long and impressive resume of flying and aviation management skills. He's currently the Air Traffic and Airspace Officer for the Alaska Army Guard. Jimmy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Last time we talked about the new Class D airspace at Bryant, and I appreciate your thoughts and explaining to our audience what that's all about. But tonight I really want to talk about, I want to draw on your extensive flying experience and get some of your thoughts on aviation safety. So let's begin there. You are an instructor, aviation safety officer, and I know the Army's very concerned about aviation safety. Can you talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals of the Army Safety Program?
The fundamentals of the Army Safety Program, first of all, you have to be a rated aviator. So you're practicing, you're a practicing pilot, so you're not like an outsider encouraging safety. You're actually performing it yourself. So a rated aviator, you have to be a pilot in command, have to have progressed up to that part just to be eligible to go. So from there, of course, they'll go over human factors, accident prevention. Accident prevention actually is the biggest part. So it's pretty much mirrors what the civilian community has for aviation safety, the fundamentals. It's human factors for accidents, it's prevention, it's crew endurance, or crew rest, some may call it.
Where's the course?
The course is at Fort Rucker, Alabama. The Fort Rucker, Alabama is the home of Army Aviation, so every pilot goes through there. So it's a 6-week course down there, extensively for that.
One of the, I'd like to kind of expand your thoughts into just flying in general in Alaska. And I always ask my guests, what one thing do you think we could do to make aviation safer in this state?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. Excuse me. The first thing is communication. As our planet seems to be getting smaller, although it's not, everything that each of us does affects the rest of us, cause and effect kind of thing. So I'm a firm believer also that there's an alternative for every adverse condition or situation. So if we're communicating openly, we can solve these problems. And a case in point may be Bryant. There was some change, there was something new. How does it affect me? A lot of times we don't like change. But if we get together and communicate and understand each point of view, each side, we meet somewhere in the middle or somewhere between the two extremes of how we feel. The other thing I would say, especially in Alaska, in terms of safety, I have seen that there's no discrimination between a pilot with 10 hours and a pilot with 10,000 hours. So never let down your guard. Continue to learn and train yourself, and practice makes perfect kind of things. So continue to practice your maneuvers and those kinds of thoughts.
Let me shift gears a little bit. You're both rotary and fixed wing qualified, and I know this is quite common in the Army, but do you have any problems maintaining currency in both?
Actually, no. For the most part, the Army will not have you fly both categories at the same time. But there are exceptions. At one point, I was one of those exceptions, and we've had a few other people that were flying both. It's really not. A lot of people will think that you'll think you're in one category when you're in the other, but I disagree. I think if you're current in both and you're proficient in both, if you don't have a layoff in one but not the other, you're going to know exactly where you are. It's like, you know, if you have two cars at home, you drive your spouse's car, you get in it, you don't forget that car is a little different. Sure. I mean, it's, you know, as long as you're proficient in both.
Does a helicopter pilot in the Army start out in fixed wing, or they start out with flying a helicopter?
No, in the Army, all pilots start off as helicopter pilots. So they'll go through the whole program, and it could be at the end of flight school, an add-on, or it could be years down the road, you go back to the fixed wing. Opposite from the other services. I know the Navy, for their helicopter pilots, everybody's an airplane pilot first, and then they branch out to helicopters.
Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Hangar Flying is brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. And we want to continue being able to bring you this show. We want to be able to continue to put together seminars like we had in Anchorage in November and like we're going to have in April, the Float Seminar. But we need your help. And I would ask you to renew your membership for 2014, or if you're new to the organization, go on to our website, www.aasfonline.org, and begin a membership, because we depend upon you to continue the programs we have here in Alaska. Next week, the next program, we'll have Rob Stapleton back, aviation photographer and journalist. Many of you know him. But Jimmy, I want to tell you, I sure appreciate you being on tonight.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back for the marine forecast. We'll start off with a look at the ice edge. We can see in Upper Cook Inlet, we still have some ice lingering around there. And as we look out over the Bering Sea, we do have some areas of ice in Bristol Bay, and that's extending still north of Pribilofs, but extending up towards Nunavik Island there. And that is an analysis as of this afternoon. Take a look now in the southeast part of the state. Strongest winds out here. We're having more of a east or northeasterly flow, getting up to as high as 40 knots, but we are seeing a lot of higher gusts in places further to the north, extending up towards Yakutat. And then out in the Juneau area, seeing some higher gusts there as well. Some areas of light freezing spray expected Tuesday morning closer towards Skagway and Haines, and that's out of a northerly direction around 40 knots there, with some inside water seas getting up to as high as 10 feet, strongest in the north. And then out in the eastern part of the Gulf, we are seeing sea heights getting up to as high as 15 feet there on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, things calming down a little bit, but still going to see quite a few gusts, and a lot of the inside waters extending further to the south now, closer to Petersburg, out of a more easterly direction there, more northerly as we get further to the north, 35 knots there. Then out in the eastern parts of the Gulf, easterly flow 20 to 30 knots, strongest to the north. Still seeing gusty winds as we get closer towards Yakutat. Sea heights now 8 to 9 feet out in the Gulf, and then around 4 to 7 feet highest as we get further to the north. As we move out over the south central, northerly flow all around 10 to 15 knots, not very strong, but we are going to see some stronger gusts out of the Copper River Delta, and those could get up to as high as around 30 knots there. And then as we look out at the sea heights in the places of the Gulf, we are going to see them around 8 to 9 feet, and as we get further to the west, dropping down to around 2 to 3 feet there. So we look now on to Wednesday, flow out of a northerly direction still, 10 to 15 knots, becoming more variable as we get closer towards Prince William Sound. Sea heights only around 6 to 8 feet, strongest as we get closer to Kodiak Island. So you look out Tuesday over the peninsula, northwesterly flow, 10 to 15 knots there, with the strongest seas on the Pacific side up to as high as 9 feet on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, northerly flow continuing highest as we get into the Pacific side, 20 knots there, with sea heights getting up to as high as 8 feet. So look out over the Aleutian Islands. Southerly flow for the most part, a little bit more variable and northerly as we get further off to the east. And as we get way out to the west, southwesterly flow, 15 to 20 knots there. Sea heights up to as high as 10 feet. As we look out on Wednesday, things picking up a little bit. Southerly flow up to 35 knots. Sea heights getting up to as high as 13 feet. So you get further to the east, dropping back down to around 10 to 15 knots, switching it up, becoming more westerly or northwesterly there. And then we are going to see strongest sea heights on the Pacific side, getting up to as high as 8 feet as we get further off to the east. Lower only about 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. Along the coastline, flow pretty variable, 10 to 15 knots, becoming more southerly as we get further to the Pribilofs. And then sea heights only getting up to about 7 feet closer to the Pribilofs. And then on Wednesday, flow becoming more southerly, 10 to 15 knots, sea heights only around 6 feet around the Pribilofs. As we look along the Arctic coast, easterly flow 25 knots, dropping down as we get further to the west, but still an easterly component, 15 to 20 knots there. And then on Wednesday, it says Saturday, but this is for Wednesday out of a southwesterly direction, 15 knots, and then becoming more westerly as we get further off to the east, around 20 knots there as well. Taking us into a quick recap for tonight, we have low pressure bringing in a rain and snow mix to the southeast part of the state with a high wind warning in effect until 4 p.m. tomorrow for areas around the Juneau area. And as we get over mainland Alaska, high pressure dominating, clearing out the skies, maybe some low clouds underneath, but the upper levels are going to be pretty clear. Some snow out from St. Lawrence Island down into the Alaska Peninsula, rain and snow mixed down there. Rain for the central Aleutian Islands with some isolated snow showers further off to the west. So we move into Tuesday, high pressure starting to build in from the south. Rain showers for central Aleutian Islands mixing with snow as we get further to the west. Some rain and snow showers for the Pribilofs as well. Snow still up by the Gamble area. And then we are going to see some more rain and snow in the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure continuing to dominate all of mainland Alaska, keeping things clear and dry on Tuesday. And then some rain still in the southern parts of the southeast that's going to be up towards Sitka. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.